education, and if they could, I think there's several people maybe together, or y'all want to come separately, however you want to do it, but I think the first one is Dr. Ann Ramsdell. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dr. Ann Ramsdell. I'm an associate professor of cell biology and anatomy. I hold dual appointments with the University of South Carolina School of Medicine and an adjunct appointment with USC. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I'm here today as a health educator in support of the amendment to comprehensive health education, and as someone who teaches health education to undergraduate, graduate, and medical students. I've been alarmed by the lack of sex education amongst our students, especially those pursuing careers in the health professions. In my undergraduate course on women's health, I find that we end up spending a good part of each semester going back and covering basic sex education. It is concerning to me because many of my students, in fact most of them, have grown up in South Carolina, and yet they're arriving to college without being able to name parts of their own bodies or explain how they function. Inevitably, each year that I teach this course on women's health, we go back and spend a good part of our time on the fundamentals of sex education. This comes at the expense of reducing the time that we can spend on other important health topics. For example, things like cardiovascular disease, cancer, nutrition, community health, to name but a few. And unfortunately, this problem seems to extend also to our medical students. As an example, last fall semester, I taught introductory embryology to our first-year medical students. Now, these are students who presumably have a lot of biology coursework in their backgrounds. I was very concerned the first week of the first year of medical school, only 1 out of 100 medical students sitting in my classroom had ever been taught how a woman's menstrual cycle works. Imagine having to go back and teach, not review, but teach these fundamentals to medical students. I'm here today because I've seen firsthand the consequences of lack of sex education and or misinformation that the students have when they're arriving to my classroom. And I think it is imperative that medically accurate health information be taught in South Carolina schools. I think we owe it to our students, who are our future healthcare consumers, as well as our future healthcare providers, to give them the medically accurate information that they need to understand how the body works.
You have a question, Senator Greenwood?
I'm sorry, sir.
Dr. Ramsdell, thank you for being here. Your expertise on is noted and respected, and I appreciate what your testimony is. I did want to ask you a question about the entire scope of science as it relates to physiology. Maybe that's I don't know that all the high schools offer a course in physiology, but certainly they offer biology. And it sounds as if maybe the ball is being dropped in places other than comprehensive health. I don't think comprehensive health education encompasses the entire scope of human physiology, body parts, for example. Wouldn't that be a subject that should be covered in more than comprehensive health in the high school?
I can't speak to what's being taught K through 12 since I'm a university faculty member.
But you're assuming that it's being taught or should be taught.
I do believe it should be taught before
Comprehensive
college.
health?
Yes, sir. I do
Do you-
believe
do you
that
not-
students
do you-
should be taught
Yes, ma'am.
their
Do you-
body parts.
Well, I mean, They probably know their body parts by the time you get to high school. But what I wanted to ask you though, on the, you assume that the high schools, the public schools are teaching it, and yet you're here to speak on this bill, which really probably doesn't, except as it relates to sexual activity, doesn't get into human biology. And I haven't read the bill that carefully lately that we wrote 30 years ago, but it's not antiquated. In fact, science is coming around to abstinence because it builds character. Anyway.
I agree that abstinence is part of a comprehensive
But
education.
let's talk about body parts being taught in high school. What subject areas should it be addressed specifically and in very great detail?
Health education is where it should begin.
Health education.
Yes, sir. I have students each year who cannot distinguish a uterus from a vagina. I had students this past semester, spring semester, who believed that menstrual flow exits the urethra. I've had students who don't understand the fundamentals of their bodies.
That could get into, I understand that, but what subject area, I'm not qualified to talk about this, Mr. Chairman. I'm not an educator, but what, I'm asking a professional, are you in education as well? You're strictly an educator in your area of biology, right?
I'm an educator and a researcher
In biology.
in cell and molecular biology.
Okay, well, it seems to me that that should carry over or feed down to the high school. That biology should be where I should have learned about body parts, both male and female.
That would be one area where it should be taught. I would argue that it needs to be taught even sooner. The average age of puberty in females begins around 9 years old.
And the average
And it's about a
age-
year later for
Right.
males.
And the average age of adolescence has been bumped up to around 24 or 25.
Well, it is true that human brain development is not complete until the early to mid-20s.
That's right. And during all that time, this is good news for people who are trying to reform behaviors. But that's part of, that's neuroscience is part of the brain. The brain's part of the body, and but I don't know that sex education, comprehensive health education, should be in teaching the first stop off for teaching about body parts. That seems to be a biological foundation of biology, the human body.
Well, I agree that understanding our body parts is a very fundamental area. And I believe that just as we need to teach our children about their bodies in the context of making good nutritional choices and the importance of exercise, that we should also start teaching them about their reproductive body parts as they are approaching puberty and adolescence. I think that by waiting until our students are reaching college or university, it's too late.
No one up here, I know my friends, and no one's even thought that. Waiting until college. I'm saying that biology is taught in high school and probably in middle school. I don't know that. But it seems to me that just as we're learning about what you call the body of a grasshopper and all of its moving parts, that we don't take a giant step over the human body because it's a little bit more sensitive. We have to wait till they get older. I don't think that's going on. I think that age appropriate information, that's why that it's in the Comprehensive Health Act. If you read it, you would know that it separates male and female when some information is being given. And so some males aren't ready to hear about menstruation, for example. Some girls need to hear about menstruation at age 8 and 9. And I understand that.
Senator, I think we,
I'm tired of
we've
talking
got
too.
2 other people that haven't asked to be, but I don't want to cut you off. Is there anything you want to summarize that you haven't already said? But we've got Deborah Billings and Patty Walker here too that wanted to be, I think we're about to run out.
I'd like to save some time for my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you.